Let's be real for a second. When Jimin walked onto the Arirang comeback stage with that long, flowing blonde hair, nobody was prepared. ARMY lost their minds. The photos went everywhere. The clips went viral within minutes. Fans were saying it was the most beautiful Jimin had ever looked. It became the defining image of the entire BTS comeback era, a visual so iconic that it's now impossible to imagine this chapter of Jimin's story without it. But what if that look had never happened? What if someone had gotten their way and Jimin showed up to one of the biggest comebacks in K-pop history looking completely different? Because that almost happened. And on April 29th, Jimin sat down on a live broadcast with J-Hope, Suga and V, and he told everyone exactly what went down behind the scenes. Before we get into what Jimin revealed, we need to talk about why this hair even matters so much. Because if you're not deep in the ARMY world, you might be thinking, it's just hair, right? Wrong. For BTS fans, Jimin's appearance has always been a conversation. Every era, every comeback, every photo shoot, ARMY notices everything. But this time was different. This time, the long blonde hair wasn't just an aesthetic choice. It became a symbol of Jimin doing things on his own terms. A symbol of artistic freedom. A symbol of a man who had just come out of mandatory military service and was ready to show the world exactly who he was, without filters, without compromise. The hair was Jimin saying, "I'm back, and I'm doing this my way." And the response from fans was overwhelming. Within days of the first Arirang content dropping, the hashtag JiminHair was trending globally. Edits were flooding Twitter and TikTok. International media was writing about it. People who had never even listened to BTS before were suddenly searching his name because of a single image. So on April 29th, Jimin went live on Weverse alongside J-Hope and Suga, with V joining as a surprise guest. It was supposed to be a fun, casual post-concert hangout. BTS had just wrapped another leg of the Arirang World Tour in Tampa, Florida, and the energy was high. The members were laughing, joking around, being their chaotic selves. And then the topic of Jimin's hair came up. Naturally, because of course it did. Everyone wanted to know the story behind it. And what Jimin said next absolutely shook the room. Jimin told everyone that when he first decided he wanted to grow his hair long and go blonde for this comeback era, virtually nobody around him was on board. Not his team, not his stylists, not the people at HYBE. He said, and these are his words, that even the company came to him and essentially told him he should probably cut his hair. Think about that for a moment. HYBE, one of the most powerful entertainment companies in the world. The company that manages BTS. The company that has made billions of dollars off these 7 men. They looked at what is now arguably the most talked about visual in K-pop in 2026 and said, "We don't think this is a good idea." They wanted Jimin to go a different route. They wanted him to cut it. And here's where it gets even more interesting. Jimin didn't fight them with data. He didn't put together a presentation. He didn't argue trends or aesthetics or what other idols were doing. He just said no. Why? Because his mom told him it looked good. His mom was the one person in his entire circle who looked at that long blonde hair and said, "Yes, keep it." Everyone else said cut it. His mom said keep it. And Jimin, this world-famous performer who sells out stadiums across the globe, who has millions of fans hanging on his every move, chose to listen to his mom. And honestly, it's one of the most human, most relatable, most beautiful things he could have possibly done. Because at the end of the day, ParkJimin is still a son who trusts his mother's eye more than any corporate opinion. Now let's talk about ARMY's reaction. Because the internet did not stay quiet. The moment clips from that live broadcast started circulating, and they spread fast, the way BTS content always does. Fans had a lot of feelings. And most of those feelings were directed at HYBE. There was frustration. There was outrage from some corners of the fandom. People were asking why a company would try to control something as personal as an artist's hair. Some fans pointed to a larger pattern they believe they've been seeing throughout this comeback cycle, arguing that Jimin has been navigating more friction from his label than his fellow members. Others pushed back on that narrative, saying it's normal for stylists and label reps to offer input, and that Jimin had every right to override that input, which he did. But even those more measured fans still found themselves applauding Jimin for standing firm. The phrase that kept getting quoted across every platform was the line Jimin used during the live. "I just wanted to try something different for once." 6 words that hit different when you sit with them. Because think about what Jimin has been through. He enlisted in the military. He came back. He stepped back into one of the most demanding entertainment industries in the world. And all he wanted was to try something different. To take a creative risk. To trust his own instincts and his mom's over the institutional pressure around him. That's not just a hair story. That's a story about an artist choosing himself. And here's something that makes this even more layered. Jimin isn't new to this. This isn't the first time he's pushed back against expectations or chosen to do something bold with his image. Look at the trajectory of his solo work, from the haunting emotion of Filter, to the raw vulnerability of Face, to his album Muse, and now to his contributions across Arirang. Jimin has always been the member of BTS, most willing to sit in discomfort creatively, to go to places emotionally that others might step back from. The long blonde hair is consistent with that identity. It's theatrical. It's striking. It invites you to look. And more than that, it was his choice. Fully, completely, without compromise. Let's also talk about J-Hope and Suga's reaction during that live, because it's worth noting. They were sitting right there when Jimin shared this. And neither of them seemed particularly shocked. There was a kind of knowing energy in the room. The energy of people who have been watching their friend navigate these kinds of pressures for years and are proud of him for standing his ground. J-Hope's reaction was warm and supportive. Suga, who is famously more reserved, had that quiet look of someone who completely understood where Jimin was coming from. And V, joining as a surprise guest, brought the playful energy that always shifts the tone of any BTS live, but even he seemed to appreciate the weight of what Jimin was sharing. One thing that's important to say here, because accuracy matters, is that Jimin wasn't dragging HYB in that live. He wasn't airing grievances or starting a war. He was just being honest. He was answering a question about his hair, and he gave an honest answer. That's actually very Jimin. He doesn't perform emotions he doesn't feel, and he doesn't hide experiences that shaped him. He spoke about it with a lightness, almost like he found it a little funny in retrospect, while still making clear that it was a real tension he had to navigate. The fans who turned it into something much larger may have been projecting some of their own frustrations onto the moment. But the moment itself, it was genuine, warm, and quietly powerful. Now zoom out for a second and think about what the story means in the bigger context of the Arirang era. BTS came back after years away. They dropped what might be the most anticipated album in K-pop history. They sold out a world tour. They streamed a comeback concert on Netflix, watched by millions. They performed at the Guggenheim. They were on The Tonight Show. Every single thing about this comeback has been massive. And yet, one of the moments that people keep coming back to, one of the moments that feels the most real, the most intimate, is a man on a live stream saying his mom was his only supporter. That's the power of authenticity. That's why ARMY doesn't just follow BTS, they feel connected to them. There's also something worth unpacking about the dynamic between an artist and a major label in moments like these. HYB is not a villain in this story. They're a company. Companies have opinions, they have brand management teams, they have stylists, they have people whose entire job is to think about image. It's not unusual, and it's not necessarily wrong, for those people to offer input. What matters is how that input is handled. And in this case, Jimin heard the input, considered it, and made his own call. That's exactly how it should work. The fact that his decision turned out to be right, that the long blonde hair became the defining visual of the entire comeback, is almost beside the point. What matters is that he trusted himself. Let's bring it back to the hair for a moment, because we should appreciate just how visually impactful this choice has been. In the Arirang music video, Jimin's long hair moves like it's part of the choreography. In performance clips from the world tour, you can see it catching the light during his solo stages in a way that looks almost cinematic. In the photos that fans have taken at concerts and shared across social media, the hair is consistently what draws the eye first. It elevated every visual from this era. It created contrast. It created drama. It created a version of Jimin that felt new and exciting while still being completely, recognizably him. And maybe that's the final thing to take away from all of this. In an industry that is obsessed with control, with managing every variable, with minimizing risk, with presenting artists in ways that are tested and safe and broadly appealing, Jimin chose something different. He chose something that nobody around him, except his mom, believed in. He chose the long hair because he wanted to try something different for once. And in doing so, he created one of the most memorable looks in K-pop history, sparked a global conversation, and gave ARMY yet another reason to feel proud of the man he is becoming. Sometimes the most radical thing you can do is simply trust yourself. And sometimes, all you need is one person in your corner. For Jimin, that person was his mom. And honestly, that's everything. But let's go even deeper for a second, because this story actually connects to something that a lot of people in the music industry, not just K-pop, but the entire global music industry, have been wrestling with for years. The question of how much creative control an artist should have over their own image. And it's not a simple question. On one side, you have the artist, the person whose face, body, and identity are literally the product. On the other side, you have the label, the company that invests enormous amounts of money, resources, and infrastructure into building and sustaining a career. Labels aren't wrong to have opinions. They see trends, they analyze data, they understand market positioning in ways that individual artists sometimes can't or don't want to. And in fairness to HYB, they have built BTS into one of the most successful acts in the history of recorded music. Their track record isn't nothing. But here's the tension that will never fully go away. The artist has to live inside the image. The artist has to perform it, embody it, carry it with them every single day. If Jimin had cut his hair because people told him to, he would have spent this entire era performing in a version of himself that he didn't fully believe in. And audiences can feel that. ARMY especially can feel that. They are among the most perceptive fan communities on the planet. They would have noticed something was slightly off, even if they couldn't name exactly what it was. There's a word that gets thrown around a lot in K-pop discourse, and that word is authenticity. Fans talk about it constantly. They reward it when they see it. They mourn when they feel it's missing. And here's the thing about Jimin specifically. Authenticity is his whole brand, whether he intended it that way or not. From the very beginning of his BTS journey, Jimin has been the member who wears his emotions closest to the surface. He cries at concerts. He talks openly about his insecurities. He pushes himself past what's comfortable and then tells you about it afterward. He is, in the deepest sense of the word, present in every performance, in every interview, in every live stream. And that presence is what has made him one of the most beloved performers of his generation. So when he says he wanted to try something different for once, and that only his mom supported him, fans don't just hear a hair anecdote. They hear a confirmation of something they already believed about him. That he is genuinely, stubbornly, beautifully himself, even when the room is telling him otherwise. And then there is the world tour context, which matters more than people might initially realize. The Arirang World Tour is historic in scope. 80-plus dates, stadiums across multiple continents, cities that BTS has never performed in before. Every night, Jimin walks out onto that stage in front of tens of thousands of people who have waited years for this moment. Some of them have saved money for months to buy their tickets. Some of them have flown from other countries. Some of them are seeing BTS live for the very first time. And every single one of them is looking at a Jimin who kept his long blonde hair because he trusted himself and his mom over everyone else. There is something almost poetic about that. The look that almost didn't happen is now the look that hundreds of thousands of people associate with the most joyful moment of their ARMY experience. The look that the company almost talked him out of is now the look in their concert photos, in their memories, in the videos they'll watch for the rest of their lives. That's not irony, that's vindication. And we haven't even talked about the dance video yet. Because the same week all of this was unfolding, the live, the hair revelation, the ARMY reaction, Jimin dropped the #TheSisJimin Instagram dance video. Barefoot, long blonde hair tied back, dancing to a slow jam remix in what looks like golden hour light filtering between buildings. The clip crossed 30 million views in under 24 hours. And here's what is so striking about the timing of all of this. Jimin chose to post that video on the same day he was getting on a live and telling the world that everyone had told him to look different. There is a quiet confidence in that. A statement made not with words but with action. He wasn't just saying he trusted himself. He was showing you what that trust looks like when it's fully realized. The video isn't a comeback promo. It's not a calculated brand moment. It's a man who loves to dance, dancing, in a style and a silhouette that he chose entirely on his own terms. And the internet responded the way it always responds when something is genuinely, undeniably real. It went absolutely wild. RM commented. Fans made compilation edits within hours. The hashtag trended in multiple countries simultaneously. But beyond the numbers, beyond the trending, beyond the view count, what people kept coming back to in the comments was a feeling. A feeling that they were watching someone be completely free. And when you hold that video up against the story Jimin told on the live, the story about how hard he had to fight just to keep the look that makes that video so visually iconic, the whole picture snaps into focus. The freedom you see on screen wasn't handed to him. He had to choose it, again and again, in rooms full of people telling him otherwise. That's not a small thing. That's character. That's the kind of person Jimin has always been, and the kind of artist he is becoming even more fully with every single year. If this story hit you the way it hit us, drop a comment below telling us what you think about Jimin's decision to keep his hair, and whether you think ARMY's reaction to HYB was fair or over the top. And if you're new here and you want more BTS content just like this, hit that subscribe button because we cover everything. The moments, the music, the stories behind the stories. We'll see you in the next one.